You know, we're absolutely surrounded by media, right? Films, news, video games, it's everywhere. But does it actually change us? In this explainer, we're going to try and unpack that huge, and let's be honest, pretty controversial question: what is the real relationship between the stuff we consume and the way we behave?
I mean, it's a question we've all asked ourselves, probably after binge-watching a gritty crime show or seeing a really shocking news report. Does what we see on screen actually seep into our real lives? Does it shape our actions, our fears, maybe even who we are? That's the big question we're tackling today.
And of course, whenever you talk about media effects, the conversation almost always kicks off in one place: violence. It is, without a doubt, the most common and the most serious accusation that gets thrown at the media. So let's start right there.
Okay, let's take a classic example: the Columbine school shooting. The story that formed almost overnight in the media was simple, and it was powerful. The shooters played the video game Doom, therefore, the game caused the shooting. A really similar story popped up in the UK with the tragic James Bulger case, where a horror movie got the blame, even though there was zero evidence the boys involved had ever even seen it. It's a simple cause and effect story, but is it actually true?
So the idea driving these stories is something called imitation. This concept goes way back to famous psychological studies like the 1961 Bobo doll experiment. Basically, researchers had kids watch an adult getting aggressive with a doll, and what they found was that the children who saw that violent behavior were way more likely to play violently themselves. So the theory goes, maybe vulnerable audiences just copy what they see.
The second big theory is a little more subtle. It's called desensitization. The argument here is that if you have a constant diet of media violence, both real and fictional, it slowly chips away at your sense of shock and horror. Violence starts to seem like a normal, maybe even a glamorous way to solve problems. Our whole view of reality gets kind of twisted, making us more accepting of violence in the world around us.
So, we've got these two pretty powerful theories: imitation and desensitization. Seems straightforward enough, right? Well, this is where it gets interesting, because when sociologists really start to dig into the data, the picture becomes much murkier. Yeah, it turns out the link isn't so clear at all. First off, a lot of the research has, let's just say, issues. It often fails to separate out the effect of specifically violent media. Then there's this idea of catharsis. For a lot of people, playing a violent game is just a way to blow off steam. Third, media can actually do the opposite. It can sensitize us to violence. Think about the coverage of the Parkland shooting. It fueled a massive movement against gun violence. And finally, the big one: correlation versus causation. The classic chicken and egg problem. Do violent people seek out violent media, or does the media make them violent? We just don't know for sure.
And this brings us to maybe the single biggest problem with the media causes violence argument. Researcher Steven Pinker has shown that, and this is going to sound wild, despite how it feels, the rate of violent death has been on a massive, long-term nosedive for centuries. The entire age of mass media has actually happened during one of the most peaceful eras in human history.
So, what if we're asking the wrong question entirely? Maybe the real impact to the media isn't about making one specific person violent. Maybe it's about something much bigger: how society as a whole reacts to things it doesn't like.
And this is the key pivot. The media's power might not be in creating deviant behavior, but in shaping how the public and the authorities respond to it. And sociologists have a really powerful concept to explain exactly how that works.
It's called deviance amplification. The term was coined way back in 1964 by a sociologist named Leslie Wilkins. The core idea is that when the media shines a spotlight on a problem, its reaction can actually make that problem worse, creating this vicious cycle that just spirals and spirals. So, let's walk through how this spiral works. It starts when the media identifies some kind of behavior and labels it as deviant. This makes the group feel isolated, maybe even unfairly targeted. The media coverage then fuels a bigger public reaction, putting pressure on police and politicians to do something. So what does the group do? In response to being labeled and targeted, they might just double down on their behavior. And that, of course, leads to an even stronger reaction from authorities, and the spiral just keeps going, amplifying the very thing it was supposed to stop.
Now, a huge engine that drives that amplification spiral is something I bet you've heard of, or at least you've felt it even if you don't know the official name for it: the moral panic.
Sociologist Stanley Cohen defined a moral panic as this wave of intense, often totally exaggerated fear about a specific group. Through sensationalized reporting, the media creates what he called folk devils, basically a convenient enemy for society to blame its problems on, whether that's a teenage subculture, immigrants, or, yep, video gamers.
Okay, so why do these panics even happen? Well, there are two main schools of thought here. On one hand, you have the interpretivist view. They say panics bubble up from real, genuine public anxiety. The media just picks up on those fears and amplifies them. But on the other hand, the Neo-Marxist view is a lot more cynical. It argues that these panics are actually manufactured by the powerful to distract all of us from the real problems, like economic inequality, by creating an easy scapegoat.
Okay, so far we've focused a lot on the potential negative effects, right? Violence, deviance, moral panics, but that is only half the story. It is absolutely crucial to remember that the media can also be an incredible force for good.
And the positive impacts are just immense. I mean, the media builds community, giving us all shared experiences to talk about. It educates us. It helps us figure out and explore our own identities. It can empower marginalized groups, raise global awareness about critical issues, and create totally new ways for us to get involved in politics.
New media, especially, has been a complete game changer. It's given a platform and a powerful voice to countless individuals and groups who were pretty much invisible before. It's allowed them to connect, to organize, and to demand change in ways that were just unimaginable a generation ago.
So in the end, the media's effect isn't some simple equation of watch this, do that. It's this incredibly complex, powerful force that shapes our social world in countless ways, both good and bad. Which leaves us with one last, vital question to think about. If the media is our window to the world, who's standing behind the curtain, deciding what part of the view we get to see?